didn't see anything because they blindfolded me right away. And now I had to sink into a pool full of insects. My biggest fear. I would definitely have a panic attack again. My heart was pounding, my legs were weak, but my classmates were holding my hands. God, was this really happening to me? I could feel the insect bodies crunching beneath me, and I could feel the maggots crushing under me, gritting my teeth. I tried hard not to scream, but when I felt the slimy worms touch me, I couldn't stand it. My head was spinning. My chest was tight, and I couldn't even move in fear. I was dying. And I just wanted to finally find friends. A couple of weeks ago, I transferred to a new school, and that happened because, to be honest, it's still hard for me to think about it. My friend Tracy died in a car accident. She was the only one I talked to. After her funeral, something strange started happening to me. Severe panic attacks. Sometimes I could faint out of the blue. I was literally going crazy with loneliness. I couldn't admit it to my parents. A long time ago, I had already asked them for help, but they reacted very sharply, and now they would put me in an asylum right away. I urgently needed to find some company to distract myself. I couldn't bear to be without Tracy, but they didn't want to accept me in the new class. One of the coolest companies was with Sam at the head, my classmate. Sam and his friends seemed very friendly, constantly having fun and going to joint parties. More than anything in the world, I would like to be among them right now. But when I tried to make friends with them, they just made fun of me. Sam said there was no way I'd fit in with them. He gave me a quizzical look. He was from a rich family, wore branded clothes, and clearly despised those who were poorer. And my family had never been well off. Despite this, I did not give up trying to make friends with Sam's company. I would treat them with something, then I would tell them the answers to the test. But in vain, I was almost desperate to find friends. Once, in biology class, we were studying insects. I panicked just from one picture. It became harder to breathe. I even felt dizzy. I'd been afraid of insects since childhood, but after Tracy was gone, it turned into some kind of phobia. And even the teacher paid attention to me. He asked me if I was alright. I replied in a choked voice that I just didn't like insects. I wished the lesson was over. I barely made it to the end, and then I ran out into the street. There wasn't enough air. Catching my breath, I was about to go back to class when Sam came up to me. I froze. What did he want from me? Make fun of me again? But Sam suddenly smiled amicably and said that he had been watching me for a long time and had decided that I would be accepted into the company. I couldn't believe what he was saying. What? Really? Sam continued, but first you need to pass the initiation. I looked at him in dismay. What kind of initiation was this? He grinned and patted me on the shoulder. Nothing complicated. All you have to do is go down into the pool. Well, it was easy. I chuckled. I definitely know how to swim. But Sam's eyes flashed angrily into a pool filled with insects. I froze in horror, and Sam kept talking. They could only be friends with me if I could overcome my fear. And he just had a swimming pool at home. He would organize everything. Oh, what? The shock left me speechless. Yes, I really needed to get into the company, but to go down to the insects, I almost threw up at the very thought. A chill ran down my spine. No way. This was too much. I told Sam I wasn't going to be a part of this, and I turned around. No matter how difficult it was for me to be alone, I would never agree to go down to the insects. But the very next day at school, I regretted my decision. As soon as I walked into the classroom, everyone started calling me a coward, pointing and laughing. I think I was having another attack. Sam turned everyone against me. I tried to ignore it, but my classmates wouldn't leave me alone. They bullied me. They framed me during tests and locked me in the class. It only made me feel worse. My hands were shaking almost constantly now, and my heart was pounding. I wish Tracy was here again. The loneliness made me want to climb the wall. I was trapped and cried all night. And in the morning, I looked terribly tired. No, that was enough. It couldn't go on like this. Loneliness and these damn panic attacks were much worse than fear. If I didn't communicate with anyone, I would just go crazy. This was my last chance to get into the company. So when I arrived at the school, I went straight to Sam and told him that I was willing to take his initiation. He exchanged glances with his friends and grinned. "Well, I'll see you at my house tomorrow night," he said. I was restless for a whole day. I was very scared. I was shaking most of the day, and no matter how much I tried to push my thoughts away, I could see a swimming pool filled with insects. Vile, slimy, buzzing. What if I got really bad there? No. I had to do this for the company, and then everything would be fine. I would never be alone again. The next day, I went to Sam's house in advance. Everything clenched inside me from fear and terror. Was I going to have to stand in a pool with insects soon? Maybe. Hell with it. I wanted to run away and forget everything like a bad dream, but I forced myself to go inside. Sam met me on the doorstep with his friends. He was smiling and holding a rack in his hand. I frowned. What was that for? But he only waved his hand. This was part of the initiation. He immediately blindfolded me. I swallowed. Maybe it was ever easier that way. I wouldn't see those nasty wiggling bugs. Hell, the very thought of them made me sick. Sam and one of his friends took my hands and led me to the pool. I could feel my heart beating fast, my legs refusing to move. But I had no choice. This was the only way to make friends. I had to get over my fear. Sam helped me down into the pool. As soon as I felt the insects crunch beneath me, the maggots burst and a lump rose in my throat. No, I couldn't. Something slimy crawled up my leg and I got dizzy. That was enough. Get me out of here. The last thing I heard was Sam shouting something. My legs buckled. I think I was losing consciousness. When I came to, I immediately saw Sam and the guys from his company. They were all leaning over me, each trying to help me. Someone was splashing water on my face. Someone was holding my head. But Sam was the most worried. He was terribly pale. When he saw that I came to, he let out a sigh of relief and squeezed my hand. He said he was very glad I was okay. I was furious. You're the one who made me go down to the insects. Damn it. You knew I was scared to death of them. If it wasn't for you, I'd be fine. But Sam shook his head. There were no insects, he said. See for yourself. What? What's he talking about? I raised myself up on my elbows and saw the ill-fated pool, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The pool was filled to the brim with grapes and marmalade worms. So I thought they were the nasty maggots? And the bugs that crunched under my feet were just plain popcorn. So this was all just my imagination? The mixed emotions made me cry. I fainted because of the marmalade. It was ridiculous. I was overwhelmed with resentment. Sobbing, I blurted out, "You've arranged this to make fun of me." But Sam shook his head again. It turned out that he only wanted to help me overcome my fear. He used to have the same phobia. He fainted even from the sight of a worm, but Sam managed to overcome it. And now he just wanted to help me not to be afraid to. But he didn't expect that I would react so sharply. He was very worried about me. Sam smiled faintly and tried to apologize. He said I was definitely accepted into the company now. And no more bugs. A couple of days ago, I wanted to hear it, but I didn't feel anything right now. Only anger and resentment. I knew how wrong I'd been about Sam and his company, and for the sake of these idiots, I was ready to swim with bugs. I couldn't believe it. Was I really that stupid? I stood up abruptly, waving away the help. Sam stared at me in surprise. I don't need such friends. I turned and headed for the exit. Sam was taken aback for a second, and then he started to catch up with me and mumbled some apologies. But I was adamant. When I finally left the house, I breathed a sigh of relief. Did I really think these guys could replace Tracy for me? It made me laugh. I was just approaching my house when I suddenly felt something on my hand. I lowered my gaze. I froze for a second. There was a big spider on my arm. Probably it fell on me from a tree while I was walking. I swallowed, and suddenly I realized that I wasn't afraid of it. This stupid initiation really helped me get rid of my phobia and eternal anxiety. I calmly shook off the spider and headed home, of course. This did not justify Sam and his friends, but now I finally felt strong. I understood that I could handle all the difficulties on my own, and I knew that Tracy would be proud of me. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
When everyone had left school, I crept cautiously to the janitor's pantry. I needed to get there soon. He finally came out, and I immediately darted into the pantry and pushed the cabinet aside. It was heavy and wouldn't budge. Come on! A door opened behind the cabinet. Once inside, I found myself in my secret room. This was a small room with a window that looked out on the school pool. In the evenings, my beloved Mia came here to swim, and I was watching her. Well, secretly, of course. I didn't dare tell her how I felt. She probably thought I was a sad nerd. We had been friends since childhood, but when Mia's dad died, she gradually drifted away from me. Because of this, I threw myself into my studies. But I continued to love her and watch her from afar. A splash of water brought me back from my memories. Mia was already in the pool, and suddenly, what was it? Mia's lovely skin on her arms and back was covered in bruises. Who did this to her? Mia got out of the water, wrapped a towel around herself, and went to the locker room. And without thinking, I ran after her. We might not be friends anymore, but I wouldn't let anyone hurt Mia. But when I ran outside, Mia was gone. I immediately took off in the direction of her house. It was not far from the school. As a child, we often played there. I hesitated for a long time near the high fence, afraid to ring the bell. Suddenly, a terrible scream was heard from her house. I froze. It was Mia's voice. She needed help. I ran along the fence to the back gate. Damn, it was locked. Then I quietly climbed over it into the courtyard and abruptly jumped down. Gathering my strength, I ducked down and climbed into the front garden, right under the living room windows. There were sobs from the house. "Fred, don't touch her!" I cautiously leaned out of my hiding place and saw Mia's mom in tears. Oh my god. She was the one who told Fred not to touch his daughter. Suddenly, I accidentally dropped the flower pot from the windowsill. Heck, I quickly ducked into a nearby bush. A formidable man leaned out of the window, a belt in his hand. It was Mia's stepfather, Fred. He married Mia's mom a year after her father died. Was he beating up Mia? Fred looked around the yard for the source of the noise. If he saw me, I was screwed. But then Mia screamed again, and Fred immediately moved away from the window. My mouth went dry with horror. I needed to call the police and save Mia before it was too late. I ran around the corner of the house and called the cops. This comeback belonged behind bars. Soon the police arrived. Fred would finally go to jail. From around the corner, I saw him open the door for them with a casual air. The cops saw him, lined up, and saluted. Wait, what was going on? I was shocked. Fred was the boss of these cops. Then I heard him say, "I think someone's on the grounds." He asked the cops to check the surrounding area and the house. I was in panic. I had to get out of here before I was spotted. I spent the entire evening thinking about how to help Mia. The police was on the side of her stepfather. How to resist them? Offering Mia help wasn't an option either. She would ask me how I knew about the bruises. And then what? I was not going to admit to spying on her. But I couldn't do anything either. I had to convince Mia to trust me. The next day, I wanted to go over to Mia and talk to her, but after school, her stepfather was waiting for her at the gate. He grabbed her roughly by the arm and hissed something. My stomach turned. Suddenly, without expecting it, I called out to Fred. Fred gave me a withering look and asked me what I wanted. With a trembling voice, I began to mumble something about a biology project. Mia and I needed to pass it tomorrow. Fred frowned but let go of Mia. "If she doesn't come home in an hour, you're finished," he added menacingly and left. Mia didn't understand because there was no project, but I said I would explain everything later. In awkward silence, I led Mia to the pool and we sat on the edge. And how would I start a conversation? I looked down and suddenly I noticed a bruise on Mia's shoulder. It made my chest tighten. Mia caught my eye and quickly adjusted her sleeve. No, I couldn't do that anymore. I gathered my thoughts and stammered out that we used to communicate so well, but for several years, Mia was not like herself. I carefully looked into her eyes and breathed out, "Why don't you want to trust me?" After that, Mia looked me in the eye and suddenly promised to tell me everything, provided that I don't do anything about it. I swallowed nervously and agreed, hoping I could change Mia's mind later. Then she began the story. When their stepfather Fred came into the family, he completely shielded Mia and her mother from the outside world and forbade them to communicate with other people. And if Mia and her mother complained to someone, they would be in trouble. Through her tears, Mia whispered that she had long wanted a normal life, without fear and pain, that is. She always dreamed of becoming a swimmer, but now she could only swim after class, when nobody would see her bruises. Her words hurt me. Fred would pay for everything. Even though I promised not to do anything, I had to save Mia. I thought frantically about what to do. I needed proof. Without it, the cops would justify Fred again. That was the only way I could put Fred in jail. I blurted out that I would take a video of Fred's treatment of their family. After such comprising material, he would definitely not get away. Mia looked at me gratefully. Her eyes were so beautiful. We only talked for 10 minutes, but Fred had already started calling Mia and yelling at her to be home in 5 minutes. The biology project was too long. In a hurry, we agreed to text each other. An hour later, we had a plan in mind. Mia would provoke Fred that evening, and I would film the whole thing so that I could later hand it over to the cops. At exactly 7 o'clock in the evening, I went to Mia's house. I crept up to the gate and gently pushed it open. Mia left it open, but the door creaked treacherously. Damn you. But the courtyard was quiet. I crept to the kitchen window and peered carefully inside. Mia had a quiet dinner with her mom and Fred, who sat with his back to the window. My hands were shaking with fear, but I told myself to be brave, only for Mia. Then she noticed me, picked up a glass of milk, and looked at me uncertainly. I nodded at her and pointed the camera at Fred. A second later, I heard shards of glass flying all over the kitchen. At that same moment, Fred abruptly got up from the table. I turned on the camera. I needed to film everything. Mia's mom blocked Fred's way, but he pushed her away with a growl. I'm the boss here. Fred was a real monster. I held back my temper, trying not to rush to defend Mia. But this video was needed to save her. Then Fred swung, and Mia squeezed her eyes shut, and no, don't you dare touch her, you freak! I hit the glass with all my might. At that same moment, everyone turned around. What are you doing here? And with a camera? Fred growled, and he moved straight at me. I froze in horror. But Mia ran out of the house and already grabbed my arm. We ran as fast as we could. But suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance, and Mia panicked. It was her stepfather's car. What should we do? And then it hit me. My secret room. He would find us there for sure. I immediately grabbed Mia's hand, and we ran across the yards of the school. This was the only place we would be safe. We ran into the school, but her stepfather was already close. Mia, hurry up! The thought of what he might do to us made me feel hot. I made a sharp turn at the corner and immediately dragged Mia into the pantry. She resisted. He'll definitely find us here, but I shushed her. Trust me. Fred's heavy footsteps could be heard in the hallway. My heart was pounding with fear. Quickly pushing the cabinet aside, we ran into the secret room, and then Fred went into the pantry. My heart skipped a beat. We could hear him walking slowly around the room, and then he stopped. Did he really notice the passage? But her stepfather quickly left, and I breathed out a sigh of relief. We went to the window and saw Fred by the pool, looking for us all over the place. Mia asked softly what kind of room it was. Damn. Mia deserved to know the truth. I looked Mia in the eye and hesitantly admitted that I was watching her from here, and realizing that her stepfather was mocking her, I called the cops. I didn't know he was in charge. Mia stared at me in silence for a while, and then suddenly screamed that it was all my fault. After the cops arrived, Fred became even more violent. I tried to say that I wanted to save her, but suddenly there was a knock on the window. Oh my god, Fred heard us! Fred had already grabbed a chair, swinging at the mirror that covered the window of the secret room. He was going to get us. I looked at the terrified Mia, imagining how much he'd been through with this tyrant. Then I was furious. You won't touch her again, you freak! I grabbed Mia's shoulders. We have to film everything. She tried to stop me, but I took one last look at her and ran out of the room. I went out to the pool and shouted, Hey Fred! Fred turned slowly. My heart sank. Then he threw back the chair, shouted angrily, and ran at me. I tried to dodge, but Fred grabbed me and started choking me. My vision began to blur. Was this the end? With the last of my strength, I pushed Fred, and he tripped over the edge and fell into the water. I immediately ran away and shouted, Mia, you gotta run! We ran out of the school together. Mia gave me the phone. The video was taken. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, You are my hero. These worms warmed my heart. But I had to give the video to the police as soon as possible. We drove to the police station on the outskirts where Fred certainly didn't have the power. On the way, I kept peering into the darkness, afraid to see Fred's car. Even at the police station, Mia was afraid to talk, but I took her hand and told her that I would tell them what happened. The cops seeing the dirt told Mia that she had a very brave boyfriend. I was confused. Before, I couldn't even answer the hooligans, but now I was a brave guy who saved his beloved girl. A couple of hours later, Fred was detained. He said that he would come back for Mia and show her who was in charge of their family. A chill ran down my spine, and Mia suddenly snuggled up to me. For the first time, I was not afraid and hugged her, kissing the top of her head. He will never hurt you again, because I will always be right here for you. Did you like this video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel, folks. Thank you so much.
Everything went dark before my eyes. I tried to take my last breath, but my lungs filled with water. That seems to be the end. The last thing I remembered was how I slowly sank to the bottom of the pool and passed out. A sinking mermaid. What a stupid situation. I just wanted attention because my parents ignored me since childhood. I dreamed of having millions of subscribers, but I barely had 100 on my blog in 3 years. I complained to my parents, but they only waved their hand and left to hang out. Because I was born when they were teenagers, Mom and Dad didn't get enough of it. But I can do anything without them. I constantly monitored trends and so came across on YouTube on a show of people with superpowers. But when I saw the account of the winner, Fire Girl, my jaw almost dropped. She kept fire in the palm of her hand and was not burned. That Fire Girl gained 1 million subscribers in a couple of days. Then I decided that I would come up with a superpower and I would become popular. The whole next week, I was making something up, hiding lighters in my sleeves, trying to break the table, but nothing worked out. In fact, what power are we talking about? If I spent all my time at school and swimming training, that's it! Swimming, I couldn't control the water, but what if I would become a mermaid? I bought different fabrics and quickly made a tail, and after that, I posted several videos in the image of a mermaid, but there was only hatred in the comments. How so? You can't break me easily. I said that when I got into salt water, I became a mermaid, and on land, I was a regular person. I decided to record the video to prove it, then I went to the pool near the house. But as soon as I put on my tail and filmed how I added salt to the water, somebody knocked on the gate. Who's there? Parents left for some party for the weekend. Suddenly, some dude with a camera tumbled into the yard. Seeing me, he stared and then clapped with delight. He said he was the director of a show about superhumans. Wow, he saw my channel and decided that he wanted to make a live stream about the life of a mermaid. A live stream? I couldn't believe my ears. The director went on, a week live and you'll be like a fire girl, honey. You're a real mermaid, aren't you? Prove it to the audience. And you will be a star. I already imagined millions of subscribers and immediately agreed. But as soon as the director left, I realized that I was in over my head. How was I supposed to prove it? The audience would look at my every move. I didn't sleep all night and decided to prepare in advance. And when the crew arrived, I was already in the pool. The director was thrilled with the tricks in the water, but shaggy cameraman Rick was scowling at me. And then the director said it was necessary to show the audience something unique. I had to demonstrate how my legs turned into a tail. I was a real mermaid after all, not a girl in a suit. I seriously panicked and answered that I was tired. Maybe we'll continue tomorrow. The director reluctantly agreed, and I was relieved. There was time to think. But the cameraman Rick hissed that he had been working on the show for years and knew that there were no miracles and I was lying. I felt the chills run up my back. Did he want to reveal me? It was uneasy all evening. How could I show that my legs would become a tail? And by midnight, I had an idea. In the morning, I got up before everyone else and glued my tail to the pool wall. Just wanted it all to work out. Filming soon began. I said in a trembling voice that I would now show what no one had seen before, turning my legs into a tail, and sat down on the edge of the pool, lowering my legs above the tail. Be calm, Una. The main thing was to do it neatly. I simultaneously climbed into the tail and fell into the water. I got it! But it was too early to rejoice. I realized that I couldn't make a move. The tail got stuck on the edge. That's the end. I jerked. There was a sound of torn fabric. Everyone heard it. But the director only clapped his hands. It seemed he didn't notice anything. All day, Rick was glaring at me, and in the evening, he suddenly declared he read that mermaids have a beautiful voice. I just had to sing for the audience. To my horror, the director picked up on this idea. So tomorrow, I had to charm everyone with my singing. God, I can't hit the notes. After filming, when everyone left, I took my tail off in a moment. Damn, it was torn. I rushed into the room and started to sew the tail, if no one could see it. Then I started surfing the internet. It was past midnight, and I needed to find a suitable voice. I downloaded a relatively good record, and in the middle of the night, pulled speakers out of the living room to the backyard. I hope no one notices me lip-syncing. I opened my eyes from a persistent knock on the door. Hell, I forgot to set the alarm and overslept. I always got up before the crew came to discreetly put on a tail, and now there were a lot of people in the yard. I shouted to the director that I was warming up. It took time, and rushed back to look for the tail. I think I put it in the wash yesterday. Damn. I burst into the bathroom and immediately opened the washing machine, but that turned out to be empty. I was in panic. Someone stole my tail. Probably this Rick decided to set me up. I went back to my room and almost screamed with despair. Farewell, my dream of popularity. And then my gaze fell on the balcony, where things were drying. My heart almost stopped. Among the bedding hung my tail. What? And then I remembered that I did it myself. Because of lack of sleep, I managed to forget about it. Now it was necessary to distract everyone somehow while I was taking it off. I looked under my legs and saw a pebble. The next second, it flew straight into a tripod standing under the balcony. The camera with a rumble fell on the ground. While the team hastily collected the equipment, I yanked my tail, ran into the yard, and wearing it, jumped into the pool. Trying to hide the excitement, I got the remote, which I hid in the fence, and turned on the speakers. A singer's voice rang out over the whole yard. I opened my mouth to the song, and even for a second, I believed that I was singing myself. How suddenly the column fell silent. I froze, feeling the heart jumping out of my chest. The team looked at me with anticipation. Then I coughed and sang the phrase myself. I thought it was the end, but the director suddenly started applauding me. The whole team applauded. The director said that he had never seen mermaids. But after my performance, there was no doubt that I was real. By the evening, when the team started to pack things, Rick approached me. He grinned discontentedly that it would be over soon. But not in the way I thought it would be. A shiver ran through my body. What's he up to? Then Rick stated that on the final day, I would have to show the real life of the mermaid. I would have to spend a day underwater. What? I protested, but the director supported Rick again. Within myself, I wailed with despair, but there was no choice. World glory was at stake. A little more and I'm there. So in the middle of the night, I went to my parents' garage. My mother said she was diving, and I really needed help. I was sorting the boxes for a long time, but there was only trash. In despair, I was ready to break down. But then I propped up against the closet. The door opened and I saw an oxygen cylinder inside. The size was suitable. I could hide it in a tail. If only there was enough oxygen for a day. In the morning, I was shaking with tension, but immersed myself in the water, trying to stretch an oxygen tube through the swimsuit. Una, you can do it. A day underwater. That's okay. The first time was not difficult. I showed tricks and depicted a happy face. But then the operator called me on the surface. I'll finally exhale. I surfaced, and he only mockingly asked, "The mermaid did not go hungry?" And then he handed me algae. The director agreed with him. I was a mermaid and would eat them underwater. It was so nasty. I tried to chew and breathe through the tube at the same time, and all because of Rick. When half an hour was left before the end of the life, oxygen was almost at zero. I tried to take shallow breaths, but the director asked me to show the signature somersault under the water. Suddenly my head was swirling, and I grazed the tube with my hand. Not that! I tried to breathe in and froze. Oxygen did not go. Oh no, did I really damage the tube? It was impossible to retreat. It was necessary to hold out at all costs. Only 7 minutes to go. I held my breath for as long as I could, but suddenly everything around started to go dark. The last thing I remembered was how I slowly sank to the bottom of the pool and passed out. I woke up in the hospital room. I came to my senses for a long time when I noticed the phone on my bedside table. With trembling hands, I opened the show on YouTube. It was scary, but I wanted to know what happened. I thought I was hated, but I was surprised when I started reading comments. The video had already been watched by 6 million people. The audience wrote that they were worried about me and loved me very much for bravery. It didn't matter that I was not a real mermaid. It was important that I wasn't scared to overcome myself and become her. Tears welled up in my eyes, so I can be interesting without the tail? At this point, my parents rushed to me, but they had to be at the party. I thought I would get a scolding, but instead, Mom and Dad hugged me. Mom kissed me. She was very scared and asked me why I made it up. I did not hold back tears. I just wanted someone to need me. Dad sighed and said it was their fault. They should have paid me more attention. rather than trying to catch up on youth at hangouts. Now they saw how I needed their support and love. When I was discharged from the hospital, my parents took me to the sea for me to rest. Now I had a lot of subscribers, all asking when a new life would be. But I said I was not up to it yet. It was important now to spend time with my family. Later, I got a call from Rick. He regretted that it came out like that. He thought about the show and never wanted anything bad to happen to me. At this point, I realized that it was stupid to suspect Rick. We laughed at the story for a long time, and then Rick wished me luck, saying that after meeting me, he believed in a miracle. On the last evening before leaving, I decided to swim in the sea, but as I entered the water, my legs began to tingle. I looked down and didn't believe my eyes. Can't be! There was a tail in place of my feet! Real! I was blown over. It turns out, miracles happen. You only need to believe in them with your best.